What's up, coaches? You're listening to the United Basketball Plus Coaching and Leadership Podcast. I'm joined here today with Marty Plum of A Pen and a Napkin. Coach, glad to have you on here.
Great to be here, Jacob. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for taking some time today. And towards the end of basketball seasons, postseason's going to be starting up here soon. Today's February 1st. March 1st is a month away. So let the craziness of postseason basketball begin. Coach, for those of you that don't know you, give a small introduction, your education, your coaching experience, leadership experiences, all of your experiences that have made you the person you are today.
Well, the person that I am today would have to start with my parents. I was really lucky. I hit the lottery. My mom and dad, I didn't think this sometimes between the ages of 0 and 25, and then you have your own kids and you realize how smart they were, but Ron and Connie Plum, just really helped shape me. I grew up in a small town in Northwest Iowa called Sheldon, Iowa. Great friends. Still, my best friends in the world are the guys I grew up with when I was 10 years old, and grew up there, did all the stuff, Gen X through and through, went to Briarcliff College in Sioux City, Iowa. That's where I kind of got my first basketball break. I went there with the intention of being a manager for a guy named Ray Nacky, who was a legendary NAIA coach. Briarcliff was famous for what they called the Panamanian Pipeline. Small school, about 1,200 students. And during the late 70s and early 80s, they had 4 guys drafted to the NBA. So just a legendary basketball school. And so I went there, helped out Coach Nacky for a year. My cousin Sarah was a 6'1" post player from Carroll Kemper. And when Mike Power, who was the women's coach at Briarcliff at the time, when he found out that I was Sarah's cousin, he wanted to get to know me a lot more. So, kind of helped Mike recruit Sarah to Briarcliff. The next fall, he asked me to be a student assistant, and that's kind of where everything took off. And I was really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Mike had recruited a really good class, a great class, including my cousin. We went 15-15. The next year we went 25-12. And made it to the national tournament. And then we made a run at the national tournament, won a couple of games. And then we went on to and then that's where things really took off. Jamie Sale came there. And so it was Mike and Jamie and I for 2 or 3 years together. And again, just right place, right time. And we were really, really good. From there, got married. My father-in-law kind of gave me this look like, you need to get a job. So I got a real job at Gothenburg, Nebraska High School. Was there for a year, but it wasn't the right place for my wife and I. We moved back to Sioux City. Jamie, at that point, became the head coach at Briarcliff. So I was with Jamie, and we made it to a Final Four. Finally, we kind of busted through there. Came just short of playing for a national championship. Ended up coming down here. Kind of the things, things didn't work out at Briarcliff the way that you wanted to, and learned a lot from that. Learned a lot from failure in that situation. And we ended up moving down here to Omaha. I got a job at Scott Catholic High School here in Omaha. Was there for 3 years as an assistant coach. Moved into the head coaching position. Was there for 13 years as the head coach. Had some good success, and then just got burned out. Just got fried, and took a couple years off. Got a new teaching position at Fort Calhoun. I was there for 4 years as the head coach. Kind of some of those stereotypical, these are the reasons why coaches get out of coaching stories that happen there. But still teaching there, still love working for the administration that I work for. Got great kids to teach. And now I've kind of, as we talked about before we started, Jacob, I'm not really coaching players anymore. What I am doing is coaching coaches. And I've really found a lot of fulfillment and joy in doing that. So it's been great. I've gotten to, through a pen and a napkin, been able to talk to people that I never imagined that I would ever talk to in my life. I got to do things, see things. Just this dorky kid from the cornfields of Iowa is friends with people that you just never thought you would be. It's absolutely insane. I'm just very lucky and very blessed in that regard.
I think as coaches, we're all lucky. We're in a very sought after position. If you're in a small community, or even though you're just a coach of a basketball or football team, that's a highly regarded position. And as we were talking before we hopped on the live here, a lot of times I feel I was guilty of this. I got my first head coaching position. I'm like, I've got my big break. I know it all. Looking back now, 4 or 5 years later, I'm like, I knew nothing in year one. And I'm sure 4 or 5 years from now, it'll be the same thing. I didn't know anything in year 5. And that's why we want to talk to you today. And I've been following A Pen and a Napkin for a while. And the theme for today, coaching coaches.
Well, yeah, very same thing. I distinctly remember getting the head coaching job at Scott Catholic. And I think most coaches come into the coaching job, I've got to run this play against the 2-3 zone, or we're going to defend this way, or we do this. And I know we're going to talk about Hoops 365. What we don't prepare ourselves for, and a big purpose of writing Hoops 365 was all the other stuff that, when do I arrange buses? How do I deal with ordering merchandise for my team, booster, fundraising, all of these different things? Because we see on Twitter, here's the best way to beat a 1-3-1 zone or whatever. And most coaches think that and I'm not saying that's not important. It's important, but there's a whole bunch of things. And I distinctly remember after about 2 weeks on the job as a head coach at Scott, I emailed our boys coach, John Bird. And John was such a great guy to work with. And I'm like, and this email, it was like the Communist Manifesto. It was so, how do I do this? Where did you get this? How do I handle this? And John was so great. I'm so very grateful for him to this day, 20 plus years. I ran into John a week ago. His son was playing basketball, and my son was coaching. So I think those are the things that we look back like, yeah, we think it's all about in the gym, but there's so many things outside the gym that doesn't prepare us for that coaching position that I think, and again, we'll talk about Hoops 365, but that was a big part of writing that.
I just saw, I think it was your post about Hoops 365 yesterday or the day before about picking 4 things that you can really excel at. And I think that as a coach is just the pinnacle of what you need to do. We talked about, I'm from Illinois, you're originally from Iowa, now in Nebraska. We're in the corn states. You just drive and drive and drive and watch the corn in all of its glory. And being from a small town and knowing a lot of farmers, the best advice that I've heard in the last 5 years was from a 85-year-old farmer. And he said, there's 10 million different ways to do it. And thank the Lord, now 2 people do it the same way. And I think that applies in his realm, it's farming, but for coaches, no 2 people are going to do it the same way. So question that popped into my head here, you brought up, Twitter, and, basically anything you want to find out as a coach now is on social media, is online. In your coaching experience, what do you think social media has done for coaching? And is that a good or a bad thing?
I think overall it's good. I think it's just like with anything. Most people are good. Most people are well-intentioned. When people make mistakes, most of the time we don't intend to make mistakes. We try to make the best decision that we can with the information that we have, so forth and so on. So I think overall social media is really good for coaching. I think that the best thing that we get from it is the information and the resources. I'm struggling, I'm seasoned and experienced. Again, if you're on a pen and a napkin, we don't use the O word that ends with D and there's an L in the middle. I'm seasoned and experienced. If you were struggling with a 1-3-1 zone or how to attack a 1-3-1 zone, I'm seasoned and experienced enough to remember that you'd have to call on a landline to somebody else and say, hey, how do you do this? And if they're 50 miles away or 100 miles away, that's how you did it. Now you can just YouTube how to beat a 1-3-1 zone, or whatever, or you can get on a Twitter handle. So I think that the information and the resources are just boundless. I think what is bad about that is that there is too much. You have to find what you think is good for you. I think the mistake, and I'll be the first one to admit, I fell into it to a degree. You try to do everything, and by trying to do everything, you don't do anything. And so you have to be able to funnel that into, okay, this is what I think is going to fit me. And some of it's trial and error. You've got to go through that process for 3, 5, 7 years. I read something about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It took me about 15 years to figure out what kind of coach I really am. And I think that's true. I think that's very, very true. It's the same thing. When I got into teaching, I didn't like teaching very much. And my dad's a teacher. And he said, you got to give it 3 years. If you still don't like teaching after 3 years, then look to do something else, but you got to give it 3 years. Well, and then you start forming your classroom and you're doing this, you're doing that. And the same thing, same thing with any job. You got to give it a shot. My kids are young adults now. Our middle child is a teacher, first year coach. He's had trials and tribulations. Our oldest has been working for about 1.5 years in the insurance industry. He's figuring out his job slowly but surely. Coaching's the same way. and you try to do too much, and that information overload, you see that and you're like, oh, that should work. Or John Shire runs that at Duke, I should do that. Or, Rick Pitino does this at St. John's, I should do this. Or Gino does this, or Don Staley does this, or whatever. You can't do everything. You got to find stuff you think is gonna fit you, gonna fit your personnel, both for the short term and the long term, and then really learn how to teach that and teach it well. And I think that's the negative part of the social media and that type of stuff. The positive is it's all there. The negative is, how do you narrow it down? And you got to be really disciplined with that, and you got to figure that out for yourself.
I think that's I can't agree more with that statement. As you were talking, I was thinking about experiences that I've had, and you try something and you find out really fast, or it might take a little while that doesn't work, and you just need to toss that aside, because in a 32 game season, if you're trying to jam a round peg in a square hole, there's just not enough time. And for me, I think, as I'm going to, well, let me rephrase this. We all use social media, and there's information overload. I think that it's a tool that should be complemented with in-person clinics, or going and watching other people's practices. It's the hardest part for me as a young coach, was finding out, how am I going to teach this? You had a thought there?
No, you're exactly right. Jacob, I can't agree with you more. You can't rely on Twitter or YouTube to form your entire coaching philosophy and your teaching philosophy. You've got to get in the gym, and you've got to watch other coaches teach the game. I go to Snow Valley Snow Valley basketball school every summer up in Waverly, Iowa. And I'm around, I've been there enough years now that I've got a pretty good lay of the land. And I work it with guys and gals that I've worked this with for 5-6 years. And I watch Liz Kay from Massachusetts teach something, and I pick up on something that I've seen Liz do this 5 years in a row, but she did something a little bit differently that I really, really like how she did it, or how she said that, or how she communicated that with the players. And I think that the convenience of social media, the convenience of YouTube, has taken that grassroots work to go in and sit in a gym and watch a coach work at a clinic for 45 minutes, to go to a practice and watch a coaching staff work for 2 hours. You have to do that. You absolutely have to do that, because it's just that human connection, and you have to connect with your players, and you have to watch other coaches work with their kids, to see their body language, to see how they talk to them, to see how they react to the coaching, and say, hey, that was really smart what Coach Smith did there. Or, oh man, Billy didn't like the way Coach Smith said that. I can't use that tone with Frank when I get back to my practice, or whatever it may be. So I think you're dead on in that regard.
It took a while for me too, as a younger coach, to realize, because being around the game in Illinois, I grew up here seeing a lot of great coaches. And you always, growing up, it was like, oh, that, like I said earlier, you hold them at a very high regard. They're almost untouchable. It took me a while into my coaching career to just be like, well, they're just another person, and they don't mind if you reach out and ask a question. How are you doing this? Why do you do this? Gene Heidkamp at Lyle Bennett Academy. Earlier in my coaching career, I would have never talked to him, but you just got to shoot that shot and be like, Coach Heidkamp, I see you're doing this. Why? And he'll talk to you. Coaches will talk, and I think this kind of discourse is what's best for the game, and learning.
It's kind of like asking a girl out in high school. When you think about it, all they can say is no.
Yeah,
right. That's all they can say is no. So okay, move on. So
yeah.
And trust me, when I was in high school, I got told no a lot. So
that's another thing that I think, as a coach, you need to be prepared to hear. No, that's not going to work. Whether you're a head coach or interviewing to become a coach, no, sorry, your philosophy doesn't meet this, or no, we don't have the finances to do that right now. But how can you build it up and move in that direction to get the outcome that you want?
That was an interesting question that you asked me. I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that before. I wrote down 3 or 4 things for both. I miss being around a team. I miss the connection that you have with your team, without a doubt. I miss taking a group, whatever group you've got. And there's only a few teams they're going to have a chance to win a state championship or a national championship. There's only a few more teams that are going to have a chance to get to the state tournament, but I miss the challenge of here's what you have to work with on November 15th. What can you do with that group from November 15th to February 15th? And how much better can you make them as a team, as individual players, as human beings, as one group? I miss that process, that challenge. And I think that's a mentality that coaches really need to take into play. If you've got 2-win talent, you're not going to take that 2-win talent and win 25 games and win a state championship. You're just not. But can you take that 2-win talent and make it 8-win talent or 9-win talent and get those kids to really fall in love with the game? And the great thing about it is from November 15th to February 15th or whatever your state federation gives you, everybody's on equal footing. We all have about the same practice time. We all have about the same amount of games. We have the same amount of days to do all of this stuff. The challenge is who is going to do the most in that time. I miss that challenge. I miss going to practice. This is going to sound weird, but I miss sitting in front of my computer. Give me 5 films on Durden's team, and I'm going to break this crap down, and I'm going to figure out how to make his life miserable for 90 minutes on Friday night. And what can we do? How can we move the kids in that situation to make that happen? I miss that process. So I miss the process of growing. When you take those 4 or 5 things and put them all together, I miss that process of forming a team, helping the kids, being around them in that way, that type of stuff. Now, on the flip side of that, I don't miss the time that it takes to do that. If you're going to be my friend Matt Fritchie, he was a high school coach here in Nebraska, won a couple state championships, went on, was an assistant at Creighton. He said, and I'll never forget this, he said, it's a heck of a lot harder to be a great high school coach than it is a great college coach because of the time you have to put into building your program, to doing it, to aligning it, the organization, the alignment, the working with your youth teams, getting good youth coaches and working with them in the right way to get them to see your vision. Those human interaction battles were always stuff I didn't look forward to, and just the time of being in the weight room at 6:30 in the morning. Now, I'm not a morning person. I don't miss 6:30 weights and that type of stuff. Now, if we did it at 10:30 at night, yeah, I'm all in. But 6:30 in the morning, not for me. So those are the things that I don't miss. And here's an underrated thing that if you've been a coach and you stepped away from it, one thing I don't miss is opening my email box in peace, whether it's from an administrator or from a parent or anything like that. I get to open my email and okay, hey, nice email from United Basketball Plus today. All right, I'm going to break that down. Not from, Mary's parents saying, why did you only play her 24 minutes and she only got 12 shots the other night? She should be playing 32 minutes and getting 20 shots a game. And, that type of stuff. The peaceful email inbox is pretty awesome. And I appreciate that, so those are things that I miss. Those were my favorite things. Those are my least favorite things.
When I first started coaching as a JV coach, I was, pouring through everything, just trying to absorb everything there is to be in coaching. But one of the things that's really stuck with me is when using the reverse psychology type thing. The article, I don't remember who wrote it, when they wrote it, but the premise of it was that coaches say, Marty, don't dribble the ball and pick it up right after half court, or don't pick the ball up right after half court. Mm-hmm. And I watched this, as I was a JV coach, the other coach was saying, don't dribble the ball and pick it up right after half court. And every time the point guard would pick the ball right up at half court, get trapped and turn it over. Another example that I found is some coaches say, I just don't have athletes on this team. They know they're not athletes. I don't have athletes. And I thought about that a different way, is saying, hey, we're athletic. We are fast. We are strong. In that, you said this, that was the quote that made me think of this. You had said in the November 15th to February 15th how do you take this and turn it into that? And I've seen in the last, we're nearing February 15th, I've seen in the last 3 months, my players believe that they are faster, they are stronger, they are more aggressive because we've been saying that they are.
Mhm.
And so the question was being that reverse psychology type scenario. Have you seen that in your coaching career? Have you employed that? Thoughts on that?
I think every coach needs to develop their own verbiage, their own vocabulary, what they mean and how they say it. And so, yeah, you're talking about there, don't dribble into the coffin corner, quit dribbling there. Okay. You replace that with, hey, before we get it here, let's reverse it here and then cut. Okay. Let's stay out of this area, but get it here and reverse it here. And before we go here, let's spin it here or whatever, the don't, and every once in a while you have to say don't do that, don't get me wrong, but as often as you can say, spin it in a positive way, instead of saying don't do this, saying this is how we want you to do this. you know Instead of saying don't dribble into the corner and get trapped, you say, hey, we need you to get it here. They're going to try and funnel you this way. When they do this, crossover hard or pull back crossover and spin it this way, or reverse it back to Frank here at the reversal point. Frank's getting a lot of work here this morning, by the way, that type of thing. And so I think that's that vocabulary. And again, that's just reps. That's just that's getting in the gym and talking with players and applying it, and you were talking about, again, the way you talk to your players and improvement. You have to find a way. Your job as a coach is to be a problem solver. You've got to solve the problem. So very few teams, like I said, you're going to have a finite number of teams that can win a state championship. You're going to have a bigger number that can get to the state tournament. What do you need to do to maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses? And every team has strengths and every team has weaknesses. What do you need to do to hide those weaknesses? I had a team where I remember we were good basketball. We were really good, highly skilled basketball players, but you're talking about the athleticism part of it. We had two kids that would give up 20 points to an orange traffic cone. I mean, they just couldn't guard. And so, but we had to figure out how to compensate for that. So how do we do that? Well, we'd been on the line, up the line for years. And then, we had to change. We had to go to a pack line. We had to put in more help. We had to play much more half court defense because those kids just could not play full court defense. But they were so offensively skilled, we had to have them on the floor. So you've got to find the bright spots. You've got to find, Atomic Habits, James Clear. If you've never read that book, you've got to read it. Mike Neighbors and I talked about that a couple weeks ago on my podcast, and just how important that book is. What can we do? I always used to tell my assistant coaches, if you've got a problem, if you see a problem that we have, that's great. That's fine. But don't come to me with a problem without a solution. Anybody can point out the problems. We're not very athletic. No crap. I can see that. How do we fix it? So I think that's the way you have to approach it. Is you're a problem solver. You've got to find these solutions. You've got to figure out how to put your kids in the best situation that you possibly can. And that's what is the most important thing that you can do as a coach.
I think that feeds well into the next question I wanted to ask is, what should coaches be prioritizing?
A lot. You sent me that and I wrote down 3 things and 2 more things and then 2 more things. Here's just a bullet point. You need to emphasize the fundamentals. Here's an underrated thing. I'm going to move this up even above fundamentals. I think you have to have in your own personal life before you step into the gym. I think here's something you need to think about. What are your personal pillars? What are your personal pillars in your personal life? Jacob, when you're not doing anything with basketball, what are the things that are important to you? And then maybe it carries over into basketball. So for me, my personal pillars, and I try to do the best I can. I fail every day at every one of these, but my 4 personal pillars are integrity, trust. I want to have integrity. I want to show and build integrity. I want to have people trust me. I want to be a trustworthy person. I want to be honest. Okay. And then the 4th one, and the most important one for me, and I think this is something we lose track of, joy. Being at a Catholic school, at a priest by the name of Father Jeff Molnar, And one day I was going through some really tough times, and we talked about joy and finding joy, and that always hit me hard. What are you doing? All the other stuff that you can do. What are you doing as a coach to give your players joy and to make them excited to come back into the gym the next time? Don't have them leaving the gym going, that guy stinks or that gal stinks. That stuff. I never want to be here again, or this is just boring. This feels like work. It's a child's game. You've got to create an environment of joy. Now, is it joyful every day? No. Is every drill joyful? No. If you lose the rebounding battle on Friday night by 20 boards and you're getting killed on Monday, sometimes you just have to have we got to rebound better. And this is not going to be a joyous process to get us to rebound better. I get that. Okay. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, but overall, you want your kids to have joy. Okay. Some kids, no matter what you do, they're not going to have joy because they don't want to be there. They're there because mom and dad want them there. They're there because they're good at it, but they'd rather be drawing or painting, but they feel pressured to be there, and I think that's a thing that we run into. So what can you do to create that joy? So I think that's the number one thing. Fundamentals, building a great culture. I think one thing that coaches get caught up in is not being where their feet are at right now. They're looking ahead to the next season, the next job, the next position. Be where your feet are and do the best job where you're at right here, right now. If you're working Snow Valley Basketball School and you're asked to do a shooting academy, or I forget what Coach Showalter calls them, a shooting clinic, you bust your butt for 45 minutes and you put on the best shooting clinic that you possibly can. I think as coaches, as players, as your teams, you get 1%. Keep the focus on getting better every day. Get 1% better. That's a big thing from Atomic Habits, is get 1% better every day. I think you build genuine connections. You build genuine connections with people. I think coaches need to do that. Again, that Twitter world, that social media world, Jacob, let's go have a lunch and let's have an adult beverage and let's just get to know each other and have those genuine connections in that regard. And then I think another thing that coaches need to do, and this is hard to do, coaching is a selfish profession because you're taking a lot of time away from your family, away from loved ones. I get a thing I really enjoy now. When I have a 2-week break over Christmas break, I get to spend all the time I want to with my family and with my friends. And I don't have to get back after 2 or 3 days to go to practice and that type of thing. With that being said, to be really good at coaching, you have to be selfish. You have to find time to study the game. You have to find time to work with your teams, this, that, and the other thing. Within that, you have to find some time for yourself every day. You got to keep your own sanity. You need to be selfish enough to say, these 20 minutes are mine to do this. And maybe it's playing a video game. Maybe it's, going for a walk or whatever, working out, those type of things. I think all those things, and I listed off a bunch of stuff in a short amount of time, but those are all priorities that coaches should be looking at doing.
It's a lot to be a coach. It's not for the faint of heart.
No.
I think to make it easier on yourself, because there is a lot that goes into it. And if you are just trying to take in everything, that's drinking from a water hose. That's not the greatest idea either. You want to, how do you eat an elephant? Well, just one bite at a time.
Yeah. A big mistake I made was not delegating. I felt like I had to do everything. That's 1,000% on me. That's something that I had to get better at. When I got back into it, I literally had to just put a couple of assistant coaches on an island. So we had a situation where we wanted to do a community service project. I had an assistant coach who struggled with organization, who struggled with, doing this and that. And I said, you're doing this. Gave the coach a couple of parameters, and then I walked away. And the coach came up to me with a couple of questions. I said, figure it out. Because I knew if I kept answering questions, who's going to end up doing it? Me. Who needed to learn how to do it? The assistant coach. And it didn't go over well. The service project didn't go over as well as what I intended. But I had to put that coach on an island to force them to figure it out. And I had to take it and move it off of my plate, because that would just be another thing that would get in the way of what my job was as the head coach. And my job as the head coach is to focus on winning and developing the program in the gym. That's my number one job. It hit me like a bolt of lightning. Mike Neighbors put something out. He had to figure out as a head coach, if it doesn't involve winning, I don't do it. And I think that's something that we lose track in, that burns out coaches, is we think we have to do everything. No, you need to delegate. Now, in this situation, let's talk about this community service project. I want this done. I want this done. It should look like this. It should like this. Go. Put your own twist on it. But now it's all yours. I've told you what my expectations are. I've told you what I need done. Here's what I think it should look like. We have a 20-minute conversation. Go. And then you have to allow them to either sink or swim. And this situation, they kind of sunk, but no regrets, because my natural instinct is to jump right back in and say, no, I want it done. And I had to fight not jumping in, but I knew it was best for the overall program, and it was best for me, because I'm not going to micromanage everything. You can't micromanage everything. You've got to learn how to trust people and delegate stuff.
And it's not just what's best for the program, it's what's best for that coach. I mean, we're talking about coaching coaches here, and not everybody's going to do everything, and they're not going to do everything as well as you would want, but
or they could do it better because they're looking at it differently.
That's right. It's always good to have another perspective coming at you. It's why I don't really sometimes care for that old adage, if you want it done right, you better do it yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's not always true either. So on the inverse side of what should coaches be prioritizing, what should coaches be doing less of? I know you hinted at that, but maybe just kind of specifically call out a few things.
Number one thing is teach your kids how to play. Don't teach them plays, teach them how to play. And there's so many good resources in that regard. Like my friend Alex Sarama does the Transforming Basketball. If you're not, Transforming Basketball is the name of the book by Alex Sarama. Get it. The first 3 or 4 chapters, it's pretty dense on, I gave Alex a hard time, it's a lot of physiology. I think that's how you say that word, how the human body works, that type of thing. But once you get into the teeth of it, it's really good. But teach your kids how to play, and instead of running a bunch of plays, nothing drives me. And I hope, and I say this all the time, I put out X's and O's with a pen and a napkin. You've seen that, here's a good play to run. Nothing drives me more nuts than I see a Twitter post, must add action, do this, blah, blah, blah. Here's what Gino Auriemma ran. But okay, Gino Auriemma, as I always say, Gino Auriemma has 10 kids that are McDonald's All-Americans. Most of us have 10 kids that eat at McDonald's. All right. So he can do stuff with his kids that the 0.0001% of us can't do. Now, can you poach and can you pick a little bit here and there and that type of thing? Yeah. Okay. But the number of plays, and again, guilty of it as a younger coach, I had the laundry list of, and part of that was the paranoia of, I wanted to have a play for every possible situation that we could run into. Well, something, it detracted from what we should have been working on, which was fundamentals, which was joy, which was building our culture, which was, getting 1% better every day. We got better every day at running plays, not playing the game of basketball, that type of thing. So doing that, I think coaches, and again, guilty of it. And a lot of what I'm talking about here, Jacob, today these are mistakes I've made. Okay. And I'll be, I'm in the place where now I have perspective where I could say, God, I screwed that up. Okay. Be who you are. Be who you are. I think sometimes you see Fred Hoiberg acting like this on television. So you try to act like Fred Hoiberg, or you try to act like Rick Pitino, or you try to act like Phil Jackson, or whomever it may be. Just be you. Just be who you are as a person. Now, you can take a look at certain things and you can say, okay, I like the way Coach Hoiberg handled this, or how Mick Cronin handled this, or whatever. You could poach a little bit here and there, and we all poach from other people's personalities, but you can't be Bill Belichick, because there's only one Bill Belichick, and that's him. That's who he is. You've got to be Jacob Durden. I've got to be Marty Plum. And we're going to poke and pick and choose from a lot of different people that help form us, but you got to be yourself. And then I think it's not about you. What do your kids need? I think that would be the last thing I would say. What do your kids need? What do your kids need from you that day? You just got your butt kicked by your rival on Friday night. You're coming back in on Saturday morning or Monday afternoon, whenever your next practice is. Sometimes the instinct is to just come in. Here's this film session. Again, guilty of this. Here's this film session. Here's all the things that we screwed up, blah, 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 this and that. Sometimes they need a pat on the back and they say, hey, let's bury that. They don't need to be reminded that they got their butt kicked by 20 or 30. How do we fix it? how do we do this? And how do you try to do that? Because you lose a rivalry game or you lose a big game, a lot of times you need to get picked back up again more than anything else. What do the kids need? And that's an instinctual thing. That's reading your team, reading what they need. When I took over at Fort Calhoun, those kids needed confidence. They needed to feel good. They had won 10 games in 3 years combined. And one of my favorite stories of my coaching career, I asked them, and this was in the throes of COVID. I got the job in May of 2020. So great time to take a job, right? And I asked them, what do you want? And I think that's an important question you ask your teams. What do you want? And I'll never forget, they told me, we are tired of being made fun of in the hallways for how bad we are. Okay, that's your goal. How do we do that then? Okay, what do you think we need to do to fix that? What do you need from me to help you fix that? And that's where we kicked everything off, and so it's not about what you need or want to do. Yeah, you lost by 20 to your rival and you just want to go in and rip them, and you feel better because you yelled at them and you told them how bad that they stunk on this and this and this. Don't get me wrong. Every once in a while you need to do something like that, but not every time. Not all the time, maybe not even most of the time. There's other ways that you need to think of it,
I would agree 100% with that. And the point I really resonated with for you was the playing more versus running plays. Again, I'm not an old coach. I haven't been coaching for that long.
Seasoned and experienced.
Sorry.
Yes.
I'm not seasoned and experienced
there you
yet.
Go.
I have a little bit of experience, a couple of years of experience, and something that I've gotten on board with is just playing more. My first year, I'm a young coach. I've got my playbook. Everybody's getting a playbook, and here we go. Go home and study this because I know all these plays up here. And we would split off at practice and take the varsity, and we'd run 5-on-0 and 5-on-5 and all these plays. Now I've taken that same amount of time frame, 30 minutes or whatever it is, and we're playing 3-on-3 or 4-on-4. And the players, then they get on the floor. We only have, for me, I only have a couple of rules. If you're, in my opinion, never going to be more open than when you first catch it. So catch it ready to shoot. And if it's not a shot, it's got to be a pass or a drive. And if you hold it for longer than a second without doing anything with it, that's too long. And we've played more free. Our playbook, I don't have a playbook anymore. We just come in and we have a couple of setups where, okay, we're going to go with a 4 low or a 4 high setup. And then we just play off of that. And it was difficult for them to see it at first. And it might be difficult as a coach to see it because they ask, well, what do I do with the ball? Well, you do what is available to you. There's a few things that we prioritize now because we've gotten really good at them, but not everything's going to work for everybody. So you have a book, Hoops 365. Give an overview of the book. What was your inspiration into putting it out there? Where do you see it? What's the goal that you want to achieve with it?
Yeah, I literally had a copy out for our. Luckily I've got a few more. If you ever seen this old movie called What About Bob?
Yes, one of my favorite movies, actually.
Okay, so you remember the scene where Bill Murray comes into Richard Dreyfuss's office for the first time, and he's like, "What book could I recommend for you?" He's got a whole shelf full of baby steps. He's like, "Oh, where is this one right here?" So
yep.
So here it is. I got a few copies over here. So here it is, Hoops 365. So last spring at this time, I had a student teacher, and I was just finishing up editing and going through the process of my second book called Last of the Cowboys, the story of Snow Valley Basketball School. Shameless plug. Snow Valley is the oldest, the longest running basketball camp in North America. It started in 1961 with a guy named Herb Livesey, who I've been blessed to get to know over the last couple of years. Herb is 89 years old. He's doing great. We're going to meet out in Las Vegas this summer for the NBA Summer League, and I've gotten to spend some time with him, and just very blessed. So anyway, was finishing that up, and I do a lot of journaling. I think it's important to journal. I think it's important to write your thoughts down, to process that stuff. Again, kind of that taking time to yourself, figuring yourself out on a daily basis. And I was going to have this student teacher for 3 months, basically February, March, and April. He was going to be in charge of my classroom. So I've got 40 hours a week to just whatever. And I really like those 360, 365 days of, we've all seen them, 365 of this or that. Tony Dungy has a great one, 365 days of being a better man. And I journaled all 365 days of that. So did that. And I'm like, well, what if there was like a 365-day guide to help coaches get better? And so I spent about a week and okay, well, yeah, that. And, I started adding it up and got to 100 really, really easily, got to 200 fairly easily, and then started getting up to 250. I'm like, you know what, this might work, and a lot of it goes back to what I talked about earlier with that email I sent to John Burt. A lot of coaches they feel like they're technically ready to coach their teams and to run a program. But then there's all the other stuff that you have to do. And so, yeah, there's in the book here, there's X's and O's. It's divided into 10 sections. Here's one. Day 54, using profane language. Day 55, community service. Day 77, bring in an outside evaluator. And the way it's built, it's big, it's heavy, but it's built like as a workbook where you can write in it and jot your thoughts down on a daily basis. There's X's and O's in it. There's coaches that you can say, like, here, day 134, here's Dean Smith. Here's one of the most underrated coaches that has been forgotten about. And we need to study Dean Smith. I mean, what an innovative guy. Just different things like that. And the title that I used, A 1-Year Guide to Becoming a Basketball CEO, or the subtitle, was just that. How do you run your program from top to bottom? And it covers everything from road trips to beating 2-3 zones to how to talk to an administrator to whatever it may be. And if you take 5 to 10 minutes every day for 365 days, you're going to be able to plot out your overall philosophy, at least where you're at that time, to be the best basketball CEO that you could possibly be. And so I wrote it, in all honesty, in about 7 or 8 weeks altogether. I say, I would just come in every day at work. And, some days I wrote more than others, but it took about 7 weeks to put together from start to finish. And I'm really, really happy with it. I'm really excited. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from coaches, how much they appreciate it now. Really going to make a big push for it here in the spring, because I know right now it's hard for coaches to order it because you guys are knee deep in film and practice and all that other stuff. You only got so much time in a day to start a new project. But I think it's something that when you get, take 3 weeks after your season is over and then start working on this. And I think you're going to, if you start working on this in mid to late March and you work on this all the way through September, October, you're going to feel a heck of a lot better about your overall philosophy. And again, running your entire program from top to bottom. And that's what the purpose was. Again, Pen and a Napkin has been all about helping coaches get better and helping mentor them. And I just kind of taken everything that we've done with a pen and a napkin and I put it in these, 365 pages is kind of the thought.
Yeah. And, 365 days, 365 pages might seem like a lot, but just baby step through it. You just got to baby step through it and take it one little bit at a time.
Yeah.
I had to get a little Bob Wiley, Dr. Leo Marvin plug back in there to wrap that up. Yeah. The thought I had was at the end when he's wrapping him in dynamite and
I'm going to kill you, Bob.
Yeah. Is this some sort of radical new therapy? Yes, it is.
Well, Who's 365 hopefully is not that radical of therapy, but it was written with the thought of, if you've been doing this for an extended period of time, or if you're a young coach, it should help you either confirm or, and sometimes you go and you watch, like one of the things I did in between my job at Scott and my job at Fort Calhoun is I would go and I went to a lot of practices, and thank you to all the coaches that I went to. I've always been thankful of all the coaches that let me in. Some of these coaches were like rivals, like, probably didn't like each other very much for a while, but they let me into their practices. They let me watch, and 90% of what I saw in those practices confirmed everything that I had been doing. But there was that 10% that, okay, yeah, I could do that better, or I had never thought about doing it that way. And, I think with Hoops 365, and even if you're somebody that's been a head coach for 20 years, if you can improve yourself by 10%, think of that 10% of three, that's 36 or 37 bullet points that you can pick up that can help make your program better by reading the book and doing the exercises in the book.
That's pretty good. Coach development, what we're talking about here, very important. I have a short anecdote and then I have a couple more questions for you, Coach. But one of the hardest pills for me to swallow as a coach, or understand, I should say, one of the hardest things to understand. My brother played college basketball for Elmhurst University. He played there 3 years before transferring to Cornell College and Dave Schlaubaugh.
Oh, Schlaw, yeah, you bet.
Yeah. And so when he was at Elmhurst, by the time he was a junior, the team made it to the national championship. In the meantime, I'm going through my coaching journey, and I watch Elmhurst play, and I watch the player that my brother was and grow and develop in that program, and just watch these players in the phenomenal way that they grew and developed. I'm like, dude, like what's Coach Baines doing? What do you guys do in practice? And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, you got to come watch one of my practices and then tell me, like, how can I build a practice and like Coach Baines to really develop players. And he's like, well, just tell me what you do at practice. And I named off the handful of drills that we do and the split things. And he's like, yeah, that's all the same stuff we do at Elmhurst. And I'm like, no. You're telling me you run continuous 3-on-2, or you're running this drill or that drill? Yeah, we do. I'm like, there's no way. You guys have gone from this raggedy bunch of freshmen and whatnot to a national champion team. What's going on there? Well, it's just the difference of how accountable you hold the guys, or how the standards that you're running the drills at. He goes, if we slack off a little bit in the simplest drills, coach pulls us aside and asks if we're tired. If we're tired, or if you don't give him a perfect effort every time. And so I realized that it doesn't matter how simple it is.
Yeah.
You just have to keep a high standard.
Well, and I think that's part of what I've kind of came up with a few months ago, the social contract. And it was kind of always unofficial in my mind, but the social contract between players and coaches. And I forget what they all are. I've got it written down, and if you want it, I'm sure I'll give out my contact info when we're all done. But two of the things that I demanded of my players is that you concentrate to the best of your ability and that you play as hard as you can every time we're on the floor. And if you do that, then my job is to teach you. You're giving me everything you have, whether you're an all-stater or you're the worst athlete in the county. You're giving me everything that I have. I'm going to teach you to the best of my ability. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to get upset with you. If I feel like you're concentrating, if I feel like you're playing hard as you can, we're good. Once that slips even that much, no. And that's, it is hard to hold that standard every day for 3, 4, 5 months, but that's your job as the coach. You can't come in and not be ready to concentrate. Part of the social contract for you is you've got to be ready to teach. You've got to be ready to teach every day. That's your job. You expect them to play hard. You expect them to concentrate. Okay. You've got to be ready to teach, and you've got to be prepared every single day. That's part of the social contract for coaches. And I think that's so really, really important, and that we don't realize that a lot of times, or there are coaches that don't realize that. And if you're not going to have consistent standards, if you're not going to have consistent expectations, and you don't enforce them, guess what you're going to have on Friday night? Inconsistent performances. And that's where everything starts at. If you've got a choice, Al McGuire said this, you better have great practices. If you have a choice between being a great game coach and being a great practice coach, develop into a great practice coach. Games will take care of itself if you're a great practice coach, but be a great practice coach first.
I agree with that 100%. Brian McCormick, I don't know if you know Brian or not.
Name sounds really familiar. Why can't I place it? Anyway.
But I had a conversation with him, and he said, I think sometimes we prioritize the wrong things as coaches. We see these coaches, Danny Hurley, for instance, who's, jumping up and down and screaming at the top of his lungs on the sideline. And we said that's great coaching. But what about the coach who just sits there and enjoys watching the players and then, makes a few tweaks like that? I think there's a little bit of balance of both, but if you did your job in practice, there shouldn't be a need for the expletives and actions on the sideline as a coach.
I laugh as you're saying that, Jacob, because when I was less seasoned and experienced, I was the Danny Hurley jumping up and down. And one time I'll never forget, my dad, pretty sharp guy, comes and watches us play and get done with the game. And he didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't do anything. He just says, "Why are you standing the entire game?" I don't know. Well, you were an assistant for 10 years. You never stood up when you were an assistant. Why are you standing when you're a head coach? Boom, man, that hit. And that internal battle. And so when I got back into it at Fort Calhoun, I'm like, I'm gonna sit here. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. Again, Coach Neighbors only talked during dead balls. I was the guy that was reverse it here, swing it, bounce pass. There's the screen, pop it, and it's just like, you shouldn't be Howard Cosell play by play over there. You need to let your kids play, try to not talk very much. Now there comes a time and a place. West High is getting ready to run an out of bounds play underneath your basket. I would get up, hey, watch screen the screener here. Watch this weak side. We worked on it. Screen the screener, weak side. And then as soon as you get through that, okay, try to get back to your seat, sit down, keep your mouth shut as much as you can. Our kids played looser. Our kids played much more in the flow of the game by me coaching that way. And again, Danny Hurley's Danny Hurley. I read Danny Hurley's book. A great book for the honesty. If you ever get a chance, it is brutally honest. I love, and I was really lucky. I got to interview Coach Hurley Sr. for my podcast. And you want to talk about a great dude, just an awesome guy. And that's Danny. That's who Danny is. So he's being authentic. I talked about being yourself. That's Danny. That's who he is, for better or worse. But after I read his book, I understood him a lot more about where he was coming from, why he is the way he is. And again, I'm in Omaha. Danny Hurley's had his run-ins here at Creighton. Now they kicked the crap out of Creighton last night, but so Danny Hurley is public enemy number one in Omaha, Nebraska, with the stuff between Creighton and UConn. But that's Danny. That's him. And you have to be authentic. You have to be you. But yeah, I just had to laugh because that was me. And then I tried to evolve, again, fighting that inner battle of just sitting there. And that's learning. That's poaching little things here and there to really get to where I wanted to be at as a coach. And I think that's what you should be trying to do as a coach.
That's just part of what we're talking about today, and being a lifelong learner. If you're the same today as you were 5 years ago, I mean, hopefully you're the perfect person, because that for us normals people, that just doesn't work out.
There's only been two perfect people in this world, Jesus and Ryan Sandberg.
That's right.
Cubs joke there.
And so to culminate all that we're talking about in being a lifelong learner, becoming a seasoned and experienced coach, you have a great coaching clinic, a pen and a napkin coaching clinic coming up here soon. Anything you want to say about that? I'm biased. I think it's a really good clinic. April 11th here in Omaha, Nebraska, Mary R. Queen Parish, where my kids went to junior high, our kids, I should say, my wife and I. And I'm really lucky. I reached out to 6 people. I'm sorry, I reached out to 7. 6 said yes right away. Then one person had to drop out. I asked a 7th, and they came in and stepped in. And so I'm really blessed. I want to, and especially we've got a couple of great college basketball coaches coming in to talk here. Nate Lenzer, who's the assistant coach at Creighton, or I'm sorry, Nate. Geez, I can't believe I said that. Assistant coach at Nebraska. God, that's blasphemy right now. Nate, and Nate and Coach Hoiberg. And I always say this publicly whenever I get a chance. You can say what you want to about Nebraska. They're 20-1 right now. My son was a manager for Coach Hoiberg for 4 years. And like a lot of college students, especially college students in COVID, he had his ups and downs. Those guys stood by his side every single step of the way. And so as good as Nebraska is right now, winning and losing, and the way that they're playing the game, I'm telling you right now, they are better human beings. And so I asked Nate, he texted me back within 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm in. I texted Eric Henderson, the head coach at Drake, within 2 minutes. Yeah, I'm in. I'm really thankful for that. So we've got those guys coming in. We've got 4 high school coaches coming in, some really good coaches from Nebraska and Iowa. We've got interactive sessions. So you're going to sit, and I think that's one thing that's different about the Pen and Napkin Clinic is we put you in small groups and we throw out topics, and you start sharing what you do with your program with other coaches from
all over the region, all over the country. I've had a guy come in the last couple of years from Oklahoma. I've had a guy come in from Jacksonville, Florida the last couple of years. It just continues to grow. If you can't be there, we'll videotape everything and we'll sell it to you at a very, very affordable price. So it's a really, really good clinic to get your hands on, to really network. It's small enough, it's intimate enough to where if you want to talk to Coach Henderson, if you want to talk to Darren Coolstrup before or after his presentation, they're going to be there. They're going to answer your questions. And so I think it's a really, really good deal. It's grown into a really, really positive thing for basketball coaches who want to get better.
I highly suggest numerous coaching clinics. I mean, this is the small atmosphere like you're talking about. Very intimate atmosphere. At the end of the day, if you don't take any X's or O's away, at least you're walking away with some new contacts and just a fresh perspective.
You're going to have the opportunity to sit and talk with multiple different coaches to get ideas, and that came from, I went to a clinic one time and the speaker was just, and I'm sitting at a table with Kelly Flynn, who won 11 state championships here in Nebraska, with Jerome Skrdla, who won 500 games. And I'm sitting there going, I would rather just BS with these guys for 45 minutes and bounce ideas off of one another than to listen to this right now. And that's literally where the idea came from. And so we have 2 or 3 breakout sessions of 45 minutes apiece where I mix and match everybody in the clinic and I put you with somebody different in different groups. And you're just bouncing, what do you do for rebounding drills? What's a last second play that you have? And for a lot of coaches, they really, really enjoy that. We have on-floor demonstrations. We have what I call classroom demonstrations, where coaches are doing stuff with Google Slides or whatever they choose to do in a kind of quote-unquote classroom setting. So it's really diversified. You're not just sitting in the bleachers, getting bleacher butt for 6 or 7 hours. We keep you moving around. We keep doing stuff here. And we've got some terrific, terrific coaches coming in. And it's really, really affordable. $45 for one coach, $85 for 2 coaches on your staff. So, I mean, it's dirt cheap. And I know for a coach, a lot of challenges is the financial part of it. You can bring your whole, let's say you got you and 3 assistant coaches, you can bring them all in for $120 for the day. I mean, $120, that's dirt cheap. I don't care what anybody says. Now, I'm this highfalutin, rich social studies teacher, so I've got all the money in the world. I'm not doing it for profit. That is sarcasm at a high level, by the way. But no, I want to keep it affordable because I know what it's like being a 30-year-old man with 3 young kids, and I want to grow, but it costs me $200 to go to the Nike clinic. I can't afford that because I've got we've got kids and we've got, this and that. So it's always been a point of pride for me to keep it affordable, and it's all about sharing the game, and that's what I try to do with it.
I love the affordability of it. And just one call out I want to make is that if the $120 for your staff is a financial burden for you specifically, read through your coach's manual, because some schools have a continuing education where they will subsidize a coaching clinic. So just talk with your ADs or say, hey, I think this is good for my staff. We're going to take it out of the program's budget. I mean, $120 4 or 5 coaches is a great deal, but I mean, just if it's an expense that you can't bear, check your coach's manual.
Yeah, I teach history, so math is not my strong suit. Basically that's $5 an hour for your coaches. I mean, it's $20 an hour. That's a great deal for your whole
Fantastic
staff.
Deal. Oh, coaches want to learn more about a pen and a napkin, about Coach Marty Plum, about the things that you're doing, Hoops 365, about your clinic. Where can coaches find you on social media?
Just Twitter, and for me it'll always be Twitter. Just at a pen and a napkin, APENANDANAPKIN. Now I'm struggling with spelling as well as math. A pen and a napkin. You can email me a pen and a napkin at gmail.com. I've got a website, a pen and a napkin.com, that there's a bunch of stuff. I haven't done as much. I've been so busy with the writing, and I'm working on my 4th book right now, and I'm kind of tying together the rough draft with that. I haven't put as much on the website as I have, but there is a ton of stuff on there. When I first put it together, I threw a bunch of things on there, and so it would take you a while to go through everything that's on the website there. But just reach out to me if you have questions about the clinic. Let me know. Like I said, email me a pen and a napkin at gmail.com, and just give me a holler. And again, my I've shifted gears where I'm not coaching or I'm not coaching players anymore, but I found a lot of joy and happiness and fulfillment in coaching coaches. So if there's anything I can do, if you want me to come in and talk to your teams, I'd love to get into more speaking engagements and different things like that. Coming in and speaking at clinics. If there's stuff that you've heard today that you would like for me to expand upon and would like for me to come to a clinic or whatever and speak, I'm more than open to doing that. It's something I'm passionate about as well. So yeah, that's where it is.
Coach Plum, thank you for your time today and talking about becoming a seasoned and experienced coach, about continuing coaching education, sharing your journey with a pen and a napkin. I just overall appreciate your time today.
No, thank you for having me, Jacob. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun talking to you here this morning.
Coaches, thank you for listening to the United Basketball Plus Coaching and Leadership Podcast. For all things United Basketball Plus, visit us at our website, www.unitedbasketballplus.com, or on X at UnitedBBallPlus.